Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great DrupalCon so far. We are going to kick off with a talk, a CMO's Guide to Open Source Security. And Krista and I are very excited about this. Just want to start off, we are from MediaCurrent. MediaCurrent is an open source expansion partner. Hope to be maybe your open source expansion partner. That just means that we leverage open source to create great digital experiences. At the same time, we have a vision to empower everyone in the world to basically have that freedom that open source provides and to impact the world. So I'm going to kick it over to Krista Travada. Krista will introduce yourself. Krista.
This is Krista Travada from Maryland. I am a director of development here at MediaCurrent with Shrop. I work on themes like team building, requirement scope management, quality assurance, compliance, and of course, security. Shrop, if you're changing your slides, they're not flipping. I did want to mention that. I think we're supposed to be on 3. So I just want to let you know in case it's technical. And so back to you, though.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a confirmation that folks can see the slides? I'm seeing Krista's.
I do see the slides show up, but they're not changing for me. I see Josh or Michael. Can you chat us and let us know if you can see the slides? Okay, yes, Josh is confirming he does.
Excellent. Okay, good deal. Okay, so so my name is Mark Shropshire, and I'm a senior director of development. I work with Krista at MediaCurrent. I've been involved with Drupal for probably about 16 years now, and so it just feels like home. DrupalCon feels like home, and really excited. Maybe not quite as in-person home. We hope to get back to that someday in the future, but really excited to be a part of this today and talk about security with everyone. So let's jump into the agenda for today. We've got it laid out into some nice buckets of content. And so we're going to kick off with a strategy foundation about security here, culture and automation. We're going to jump in then to creating security policies with those clear expectations and how to accomplish that. And then we'll talk about the importance of updating security releases promptly. That seems simple, but we've got some nice nuances around that I think will be interesting for everyone involved. And then, of course, we've got other considerations for next steps. One thing I want to mention that Krista and I really tried to focus on here today is to make sure that we have some takeaways for everyone so folks can have some follow-up materials to check out on their own. We'll share the slides after the presentation as well. And we will have some QA. We'll probably do more of the QA at the MediaCurrent booth. So Krista and I will jump from this session over to that booth and have about 30 minutes of time for Q&A. So drop by if you have a chance. I'm going to turn it over to Krista now to talk about security and the world of security.
All right. So first thing, it's $1 trillion. That's trillion with a T. And this is up actually the last time I did this these presentations, it was at about 400 billion. So it's been a few years and it's gone up considerably. And if you've ever seen the difference between a million and a trillion, it's not like what you think in your head. It's actually a huge amount of difference. So this is a lot of money that doesn't need to be spent. Now, we're always going to have to spend some money on security, but not $1 trillion. I think it's probably more than we have to. So it's becoming increasingly more costly and damaging, and it has a lot of effects that spiral out. So the first thing we want to talk about is an example of a real world breach. So this is a Target breach from 2013. Hopefully you guys all remember that. This wasn't a complex or a costly hack for the hackers, but it was costly and complex for the hacked, right? There were PR issues around this that lasted for a while. and the financial cost was excessive too. I like to show this one because we do have some retrospective on it now that we can look back and see. But this was a pretty simple hack. A hacker compromises a server, infects the file server, infects the point of system server, scrapes the RAM, gets the clear credit card data, sends the data off of the server and to where they can use it to serve their purposes. So that's a pretty simple hack. It didn't require a lot of strategy or anything. Literally take data, move from here to here. And this one didn't have to happen the way it did and when it did. Good security would have prevented this. Having a notification system in place when terabytes of data started leaving servers that would have sent out notifications could have stopped it. And at the time, it's one of the most important things to remember, I think, is that we were behind the rest of the world here in the US on our credit card data. We were still swiping cards and everybody else was kind of using encrypted chips. And this is probably what really kind of forced us to have to change that. So, with every failure, there's usually a success. So, in retrospect, this was horrible when it happened, but we did get secure credit cards out of the deal. So that's good news. So let's go to Shrop and hear about how we can build a culture of security at your business to prevent this from being used the next time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. And so we'll carry on forward here with some of the that great information and talk about this culture and automation and how that can impact your business and improve your security posture overall. So when we talk about security first, this is really taking and considering security all the way through your process. It's not waiting to the end of a project to launch. It's about taking security seriously from the very beginning. Even when you're in the discovery phase of a project and you want to consider all those regulatory concerns that you may have, whether you're in a educational area, if it's HIPAA in a medical area, you just want to make sure you understand those concerns and that you are covering things from the very beginning. But it's also about having that mindset that everyone on the team is part of improving and watching out for security issues along the way, and then automating as much as possible, which we'll talk some more about. So I want to mention a few of these items here. When it comes to security first planning, this is a bullet list, but I'll kind of talk around it a bit to emphasize just some of the things that you want to consider along the way. You definitely, as I mentioned before, want to work with the team. The whole team's responsible, but also include stakeholders. There's the stakeholders that have come to you maybe as a client, or whether it's internal or external clients. They know their business. They will have a lot of the information on what the regulatory needs are from a security standpoint. So trust that they can help bring that, but definitely ask good questions. You also want to have a layered defense. You want to make sure that we're not just talking about your open source software, your Drupal site. You want to have protections all the way through the hosting environments and all your firewalls and CDNs and everything involved, even in the development processes. Everything should have a security stance and documentation around it. And speaking of some of those development type tasks, code reviews, automated testing, those are really critical for that. And don't forget security audits. You can have one-off security audits at certain stages of a project, but you can also have a security audit of an existing project and see what types of improvements can be made. And we do that quite a bit at MediaCurrent, where we'll do a security audit, and the outcome of that audit is actually going to be a list of issues that we put into JIRA and that we then work on and improve with everyone involved in the process. Can't leave this without talking about documentation. It's really important that all of this is documented and in a way that is not necessarily overly verbose, but in a way that is impactful and meaningful, and that folks in the team actually read it. So this is a large topic. We could talk in hours probably on creating a security team, but I did want to mention that there should be some thoughts on some type of team that's responsible for security and helps with security in your organization. This can be anything from, actual security professionals that make up that security team. It can also be groups of developers who are part of that initiative. But this is the group who's going to be making policies, recommending policies, making those recommendations, assessing all of your systems and your applications and websites, and helping to automate things. But that's really important to think about. But many organizations now have security teams. So I would say the next step challenge is, how do you get those security teams involved in actually these development website projects early on, so that it is part of security first standpoint. And I've had very good success at Media Current by day one of a project kicking off, saying, can I talk to your security team? Let me, can we get a meeting with them? And it's interesting. Security teams are usually very busy, as you might imagine, but they are usually blown away that someone asks to actually speak with them early on in the process. So that's reaching out and having that conversation is really good to kick off a project. So mention some takeaways. We've got one here around process automation. Media Current has open sourced our Drupal project repo that we use for kicking off projects. And inside this repo, and there's going to be a link to it. There is a link to it in the presentation, and we'll get those slides out. But this takeaway is going to show how we set up our continuous integration processes so that we can scan for security concerns. And so we use some Drush tools and security review module, for instance, and OWASP SAP baseline scans. And this is just a part of our security posture, but it helps us to automate things that a computer is great at doing, frankly. So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Krista to talk a little bit about security policies and how to set those clear expectations.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shrop. First things first, I want to say that an effective security program should include testing people, processes, and technology. We spend a lot of time focused on the technology, making sure that any vulnerabilities found in the software are categorized and fixed, right? We categorize highs, lows, and decide what we're going to fix, and we work for hours and hours and we fix those. But looking at the processes that you're using to build your software, and if there is areas for improvement and areas that can ensure that you are putting out a more repeatable process, you're going to get more secure process. And testing the people, making sure that the people are up to date on the latest security concerns, that they understand when vulnerabilities that we're going to talk about here shortly, when these change from year to year, what the newest vulnerabilities are. So making sure that the people are thinking on a security first way, and making sure that they're being given the information that they need to effectively secure your properties. There is no silver bullet in the slide. There is no silver bullet in the security world. In a perfect world, we just run a security scanner, install a way for firewall, whatever, and go off and go on vacation because everything's safe. But that's really not how it works. There's just really no one thing that does it all. So as we've mentioned before, security is a multi-layered thing. It's a multi-layer, your people, your processes, and your technology. But then there's layers within each one of those. And so it sounds harder than it is, because if you really break it down to these components, each one should give you the answers that you need. So Shrop, why don't you tell us about the policies and procedures that can add to our checklist?
Sure thing. We've listed some items here, Chris and I, that we think are important to consider in your process and policy checklists. And so we'll start off with code linting. This is a part of that continuous integration process we mentioned earlier. I think it's really important to have readable code from a development standpoint. So this relates to maintainability. If code is not readable, if it's not maintainable, and this relates to, of course, code reviews and items like that, but it makes it really hard to not let something slip into the process that could be rough when it comes to having a security vulnerability. You also want to have virus and malware scanning involved. And this is something that can be done from a policy standpoint on your laptops and computers, but also on servers and even on your Drupal sites. You can set up scanning for file uploads, for instance. So if somebody uploads a file, it's good to have some virus and malware scanning there because it may not be intentional, but they may have passed something along that's not good. And you don't want that to be out there and being served on your web server. And checking for code library version checks. This is kind of a general statement here. So in Drupal world, this is Drupal modules, and WordPress, this would be like plugins. But we also have PHP libraries, JavaScript libraries. So making sure that we're checking for versions and any that need updates is very important. Passive and active scanning. So you hear about security scans that happen, and there's a lot of tools. There's a number of commercial tools out there that our clients at MediaCurrent use, and some of the active ones. An example of active one is one that might check for some vulnerabilities that Krista will talk about coming up, like different forms of injection, cross-site scripting. But there's also passive scanning, and that's what we run with OWASP Zap Baseline. And those are just checks that aren't really trying to look for the vulnerabilities. They're just looking for more or less like smoke signals kind of thing, where hey, there might be an actual issue here, and we better kind of check that out and see if there's more to it. Passive scans are usually faster. Active scans usually take quite a bit longer. You also want to make sure that not just your Drupal application, but infrastructure is properly updated. If you partner with a hosting company that takes care of that for you, that's even better. But if you do host your own and set up your own servers, really important to update your infrastructure as well as your Drupal or other open source project website. And then an incident response plan is an example of one of the plans, policies, processes, and then usually a form is tied to this, which we have a takeaway related to that coming up. But that's one where when something does happen, being prepared. What if something happens and we have a security incident? We don't want to wait till that happens and then go, oh, what do we do now? We want to have a plan for how to react, who should be called, how it should be documented, and who should be notified, which is really important. And that gets into your own internal policies in an organization, but also relates to regulatory requirements, frankly. So at this point, we're going to jump over to Krista and talk about OWASP. I love this slide, Krista.
Oh, good. So we're going to talk about OWASP. OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. They are based here in Maryland, and they have been around since 2001. Every year, OWASP puts out their top 10 application security risks. So they put out the top 10 things that we need to protect against. There are always more than this, but if you protect against these 10 and follow best practices, you are going to set yourself up very well. This year, it's changed a little bit, that the top 10 are injection issues, broken authentication, sensitive data exposure. Sensitive data exposure is an important one that comes down to the HIPAA and stuff. You want to be careful, make sure, for one thing, I've seen people with, URLs that will display sensitive data. That seems like a pretty obvious thing to be able to be careful of. So watch for that. A new one for me is this XML external entities. So that's a new one for me. I'll have to learn more about. Broken access control. So in Drupal and WordPress, this might be as simple as you didn't set your permissions up right, and the wrong guy has access to the wrong thing. Security misconfiguration, cross-site scripting, insecure deserialization, and using components with known vulnerabilities. That one goes back to what Shrop was saying about making sure your versions are updated, making sure you have the latest version of your modules, but also your libraries, your PHP code, all of your server stuff. If I didn't know if people actually still build servers, but if they do, making sure your servers are up to date. If you're relying on a hosting company, making sure that that they are doing what they need to do to make sure you're up to date. and just insufficient logging and monitoring. So that comes down to, if all of a sudden gigabytes of data are running across your server, maybe an email needs to go to somebody, some notifications need to go out. So things like that. And let's talk about next how we can secure Drupal against these 10. So part of what I have done to make sure Drupal is secure is I look at each of the top 10 OWASP vulnerabilities, and I figure out which modules will protect me against those. This list will be included in your slide deck you download. So this is a nice little reference to look at. Security review will just check over all misconfigurations. Input filters, while they are a core module, they are still a module, and correctly configuring those is really important. And a lot of the times it does get overlooked because it's something that kind of comes out of the box-ish, and a lot of the time allowing things like PHP into your input filters might make developers' jobs easier, but it will put your site at make your site vulnerable. So do watch out for that, making sure that you're only allowing things to be put into a database that are markup in text. You don't want any code in your databases, and these input filters will prevent that. Auto logout, so making sure that if somebody logs into your site from a coffee shop and then gets up and walks away, or a library, we'll say, because they were on a computer, that they don't stay logged out, that they are logged in, that they log out if they forget. Things like that. Captcha and Honeypot, they will help to prevent bots from being able to submit code into your databases, and they'll prevent a lot of spam. Security Kit helps with security misconfiguration. It tells you about things that are wrong and allows you to configure your headers and stuff for your site right. Session limits will help prevent you from logging in too many places, which can lead you to be staying logged in and causing those kind of problems. And then username prevention, it just keeps it from, constantly showing what your username is. Hey, Krista T, that's not your password. Well, now if I'm a hacker, you've given me at least the username. I know I got that right, and I can keep going. So things like these tools are used to help to prevent, keep your site safe. And these ones are nice because these are all contrib Drupal modules that have a lot of use and aren't too hard to configure. I think the input filters might be the hardest one of these actually to, and security kits, or the security kit's a little testy. You have to be careful with that. But
yeah, there's a lot there.
They're relatively, the rest of them are relatively simple. But yeah, security kit you do have to be careful with. So these will cover most of what you need to protect against. There are a lot of it. And then there's some additional security modules that will help to promote coder and hacked, kind of make sure you don't have any hacked code in there, things like that. Flood control helps to prevent, too many logins. But Shrop is going to tell us about Garter, which will include some of these modules. So Shrop, to you for Garter talk.
Yeah, this is great because a number of the modules that Krista just talked about and prepared are included in Garter, which is a Drupal distribution that MediaCurrent maintains. Here's another interesting takeaway for everyone. You can install Garter as a Drupal 9. Garter Core actually is the module, and it will pull in the modules and, what more importantly, the configurations that are configured to pass a lot of the regulatory concerns overall in the industry, especially the ones that apply across those different security requirements. But we're always looking to improve it. It's a great place to jump in the Garter Slack channel. It's Contrib Garter in Drupal Slack. Great place to jump in and get involved. Always looking for help and for recommendations in the issue queue. But check out Garter if you just want to install something and help to get it, have some security improvements more quickly. So I want to jump in and talk a bit now about updating security releases promptly. Well, this seems obvious, right? Like, come on, Shrop, like update security releases promptly. That makes sense. But there's some other things to consider around updating security. And the first thing I want to do, and I always like to do, is to mention what a great asset we have in our Drupal security team, in the Drupal community. This is something that we should never take for granted. Many open source communities, and I'm even larger communities, do not have as nice a security team set up as we do. And these are some of the items that they cover for us, but they really do help keep a watch out and keep keep processes moving along. So we get those security advisories, PSAs, notifications each week or month, as they were released. But also, I think I'm not on the security team, but I would think someone on the security team would also say that they want everyone in the community to also be involved. And so if you go to the link there provided, Drupal.org/security-team, there you can find some information on how to properly submit security concerns. That's something I want to mention here. It's real important, is submitting those into the security team's issue queue. There's some guidance there on how to not publicly disclose those things. They're always willing to, more than willing to answer questions. And if you just think there might be an issue, certainly ask. And there's a security questions channel as well in Drupal Slack. Don't want to post security vulnerabilities there, but it's a good place to ask, like process questions and who to contact and how to contact and those types of things. But thank you to the Drupal security team, real important. But when it comes to those updates, so that let's say that Drupal security team releases a security update, something I've seen come up quite a bit is that your Drupal project hasn't been kept up to date along the way. And then let's say that a module has an update and you go look and you're maybe a number of versions or even a major release behind, but that security release applies to that module. So here's the problem: by not keeping those up to date along the way, you've set it up so that you are going to have to jump way ahead in versions and possibly introduce regression bugs and things like that to your project. So while I'm not saying just blindly go and update every module or every PHP library in your project, it is important to kind of stay up to date along the way and have plans, not fall too far behind, so that when a security update does land, you can update. It's a little more seamless. Not a lot of code has changed. That's the ideal scenario, so that you don't introduce those regressions. And you may ask now, okay, I'm a CMO, or I'm somebody in the marketing group, or I'm not a developer, but how do I keep up with security releases and at least learn a little bit more about this? Well, the place where the Drupal security team posts these advisories and PSAs and other items are at Drupal.org/security. And what's really cool is they split the projects, the security advisories up between core, contrib projects, those public service announcements. But there's just all these ways that you can access those. And I like to receive these via email, but we also have immediate current these going from the RSS feed. We pull those into Slack, and you can use Slack's integration for RSS for that. But there's also a Twitter account. And again, there's the Drupal Slack channel. But it's really worthwhile to read the security advisory documentation. And so from this page, you can learn about what makes up a security advisory, how it's constructed, what do all those bits of information mean on a security advisory. It's really good for everyone to understand to some degree how that works and what that means, so you can help understand if an advisory really relates to your project, and how soon should you update when those are released, and are you mitigated, which just means, are you in a position where the advisory, is there, but it doesn't really apply to your setup and install. So I found that to be really helpful. And so we're going to speak a bit about some other considerations to dive into when it comes to security and open source.
They're at 3 o'clock, so I'm not sure if we're going to get cut off or if we get to keep going. So
yeah, we want to honor everybody's time for sure. This is a lot to get in. We can talk about the takeaway though, Krista. And,
yeah, I think we should jump to the takeaway slide here. So we have on this next slide, the takeaway is the module evaluation. There will be a link provided to that, and it basically gives you a high level how to evaluate modules. You look for module usage. You want to be careful if one module will solve 3 problems. Use that. You want less attack surface, the less modules you have, less maintenance kind of thing. But you also don't want to use modules that aren't peer reviewed and well tested, or in alpha and beta type states. So watching for all of that. Since we are short on time, I'm going to refer you to the document that you will have in a download here for the guide to Drupal module evaluation. So Shrop, what else do we have?
Yeah, just a quick mention here. This is a good handoff to your development teams, but it's important that developers developing Drupal applications are using the APIs and following these great documents on how to write secure code. And then we've got a few more items that are out there for consideration. But all of those, I skipped past them, honoring time here for everybody as much as possible. But the reason I skipped past them is we do have a even more robust resource that this presentation was based off of loosely, and that is our CMO's Guide to Open Source Security ebook. So it's free to download. It includes that security incident response form and template, and so you can download that and check it out. And really, like, we're gonna jump over now to do some Q&A over at the Media Current booth. We're happy to answer any questions that may have popped up in our channel here, though, before we take off. But thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Everybody.